Right, I think I can see that there are a number of attendees already on the webinar. So I'm going to get started. Just before I start, I guess people to remember that um, the webinar today will be recorded and put on the EMA website after today, once it's completed, and therefore people who are not who would not want to be showing on the video, please don't show your video even if you speak. So just a reminder that that's the plan. And I think without further ado, I'm going to kick off with a quick introduction, remind of the principles, and then I will hand over to my colleague. So first, welcome everyone to the EMA webinar, this Q&A webinar on the support pilot that the agency has launched recently, last September, in relation to academic and not-for-profit developers who are developing ATMPs. Really, the main purpose of the support pilot is to help increasing the translation of ATMPs into late-stage development in two ways, in a way, by providing enhanced regulatory support to applicants who would be selected as part of a pilot to help them navigating for the development of ATMPs and ensuring that they respond to the standards needed for future marketing authorization in terms of quality, efficacy, and safety. But also, this is something that we see as a common learning exercise to understand and identify potential challenges that developers might face when developing ATMPs, and see whether there are ways we can address those together by collaboration with academia, but also within the network with regulators. And these are really the two main objectives. We are also aware that, and we would like to thank you those of you who have already sent questions. We have taken this into account when putting together the slides, and my colleague from the Advanced Therapy Office, Patrick Sellis, will hopefully address some of these questions. Now I must be quite clear that unfortunately this is a general, I would say, Q&A webinar on the pilot, on the selection criteria and the next steps. We are not going to be able to address specific questions around products, and we have received a couple of them. This obviously hopefully will help you to determine whether or not the products in mind might be appropriate for application, but we also welcome you to apply or to contact our office if you have any outstanding questions following the webinar. But obviously we will have plenty of time today for questions on the pilot itself. And without further ado, I would like to hand over to my colleague, Patrick Sellis.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Let me start my video. Okay, let me start with the key principles. So what we plan to do is to identify 5 ATMPs, advanced therapy medicinal products, that are developed by academia, and we will provide support to them, regulatory support within our existing regulatory framework. So what we will offer is we will let you know and identify dedicated contact points at the European Medicines Agency. Together with you, we will support and proactively identify questions that would be raised at the level of scientific advice. And the aim here is to ensure that the good manufacturing, non-clinical and clinical development are there throughout your product life development. We will have close exchange and interactions with you, meaning that we will set up regular interactions and ad hoc teleconferences. And the aim of the regulatory support is for you to develop an integrated regulatory life cycle for each of the products selected. This will include progress checks and also co-decisions between you and us on continuation or, if needed, stopping of the pilot support. Financially, what we are looking at is to have fee incentives also for the 5 academics that have been selected, 5 academic products that have been selected, and that would be the similar fee incentives as for small and medium-sized enterprises. My slides would move, that would be very helpful. Yeah, let's go into the selection criteria. And before starting, I put here a screenshot of the information that we have currently published on our website. And I hope you have already found this web page. If not, I put here the web address, but you can also just type in Google EMA ATMP pilot, and then I think the second output of the second result brings you to this page. What we have published so far is an application form and a question and answer document. The application form we try to make as simple as possible. So a lot of the information is a tick box for you to complete. And then there is some open fields for technical scientific information. But here we allow, and we even say it's possible that you make cross-reference to other documents you have already completed, for example, for a clinical trial application. Now let me go into the selection criteria itself. The Q&A is the place where you find more information on the selection criteria. There are 8 in total, and I will take you through one by one and give you some additional background if this is needed. So the first 2 are quite obvious criteria. Your product needs to be an ATMP, and for most of the products that will be very straightforward. In case there is a product for which there is doubt, we will guide you through the ATMP classification procedure, a very straightforward procedure also at EMA that will be able to come to a conclusion on fulfillment of the ATMP definition or not. Second criteria is that you as applicant need to be from the academic sector, and we have identified in the Q&A what is meant by academic sector, and that's what's here: public, non-profit hospital or research organization, higher educational institution, public-private partnership or consortia, and international research organization. The applicants need also to be established in the European Union. And here, this is a bit of a tricky one. We can extend this slightly to consortia, having both EU and non-EU participants, but then we will be looking at where the principal investigator is located and whether or not EU patients are enrolled in the clinical trials. The type of products we're looking at were products to address an unmet medical need, and we will ask justification of that in the application form. What we are looking for is products that are at a relatively mature stage of development. So we are looking at products that have the potential to address the unmet medical need. And therefore, we're looking at some supporting clinical evidence or convincing non-clinical data in a relevant animal model. Now, the clinical data ideally from a clinical trial, but of course, if you have alternative data from compassionate use or from hospital exemption, that can also be submitted. Nevertheless, what we are looking for is some clear indication and investigation results of the mechanism of action in non-clinical studies and ideally in a first of human trial. Like said, we look at maturity of the product, so not only from the level of clinical development, but also we look if the quality development, including the manufacturing, is to the expectations for an early clinical trial stage, I would say. The next criterion is the freedom to operate and fully access data related to the development and manufacture of the product. And let me explain a little bit here. What we want to avoid is that a product would be selected for the pilot that relies fully on a manufacturing process or a technology or starting materials that are controlled and owned by a commercial developer or a commercial company. So that's why we are looking at this IP or other possibilities for you to clarify the fact that you are the owner of the data and the process. The next two bullet points are a bit more of an intentional one. We are hoping and we're looking at willingness from you to collaborate with us and follow our recommendations, and also that you have sufficient resources at your side and hopefully already a good understanding of what is expected for the regulatory wise for the development of a product, how to bring a product to clinical trials and so on. Ideally, regulatory support should be available at your site, which can be internally or via means of a consultant. One of the questions we received is the link with Prime eligibility. Now I can say that Prime is not a prerequisite for the pilot, and even if you have Prime, it's not an automatic eligibility to the pilot. So going into the selection process, the application form, which is on our website, we are hoping that you will be able to complete this one by end of February. And then we have set up a two-step selection process. The initial pre-selection will be based on your application form, and then we will pre-select candidates that will be then invited for a meeting with the EMA Innovation Task Force, ITF. So for this meeting, we will involve relevant staff from the all concerned EMA departments and task forces, and we will ask you, if you are pre-selected, for some more information, so a more comprehensive information on the product and its development. We hope that by mid of this year, we will be able to select a couple of good mature candidates to include in the pilot. But we will keep the pilot open. So if your product at this stage is not yet there, but it might be, you might have sufficient mature data in the latter part of this year, please complete the application form and we will continue looking at appropriate candidates up till the number of 5 candidates that we have foreseen in the pilot. And we will communicate where we are, if there are still possibilities to apply on the web page for the ATMP pilot. And with this one, I think I'm at the last slide, and we're now hoping to be able to respond to your questions.
Thank you, Patrick. So everyone, if you have any questions, you can either raise your hand, I guess, in the WebEx, or put it on a Q&A. Can see we've got a question. How do you foresee market approval, I guess, for an academic product? That's a very interesting question, but maybe Ingo, if you don't mind, maybe helping a bit more around the nature of the scope of your question. I mean, the one thing I can say is there is no showstopper currently to have an academic manufacturing authorization holder. There is, as far as I know, no precedent, that's sure. We have, however, small and medium enterprise who are a marketing authorization holder. And it's true that the complexity or the challenge might be for an academic institution to deal with all of the obligation of a marketing authorization that comes with it, because it's not just, I guess, registering a product, but then you have all of the life cycle activities in terms of pharmacovigilance, and in the term of in the case of ATMPs, you have often also a number of measures you have to do after you have your approval that includes often a follow-up of efficacy and safety. So that will need to come with the relevant structure behind this. But we are also aware that some larger institutions maybe have somehow the tools and to deal with that with some help, I guess, in terms of the resources. But that's maybe something also we can learn more as part of the pilot for applicants who might be in a later stage. I hope this address your question.
Yeah, I see we have one hand raised from Petra Reinke. Perhaps Petra, I'll give you the floor to put your question. Okay, while I think that Petra has problems unmuting herself, let's see if I can help her. Yeah, Petra. Yeah.
Okay, you can. Now
you
can hear me.
Yeah, yeah, we can. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So I already formulate my question on the chat. I will repeat it shortly because you start with a statement that you want to support late stage developments. And in one of the first slides from you, Patrick, you mentioned that you want to make sure that the product development, which means also or include also the studies related to the product developments, has to have the quality from the starting point. This is not the same, at least from my point of view, and it would be nice if you can explain it a little bit more precise, at which stage in the development you will support with all your knowledge and the frameworks behind the product development and the consequence towards studies.
Okay, so a long and a short answer, perhaps first with the short one. I think we are looking, and this is, it's not written in stone, it will depend on the data that we receive, but we are looking at products that are in initial clinical development. So anything before will be difficult for us to support because the time frame that would be needed to bring such products to full maturation might be extending far our or a reasonable time for running this pilot. So That's the short answer. Now, we are not excluding the possibility of having applications into the pilot that have not yet started the clinical development, but then it will really depend on the appropriateness of the non-clinical data and the fact if there is or is not a very good animal model for the disease that can show, and that would be providing relevant data just to address the potential clinical use and usefulness of that product. Now, I think linked to this one, there was also a question on what do we mean with a mature quality. Here we are, what we want to avoid is that products that would be ill characterized and have a manufacturing process that is not yet fully clear or standardized would make it in the pilot, because our experience, not with only with ATMP developed by academia, but more in general, is that we face a lot of problems when clinical studies are conducted before the quality of that product is sufficiently established, meaning at the minimum characterization, at the minimum some initial specifications for release of the product, and at the minimum a standardized manufacturing process moving into a GMP-like setting. So I hope that provides a little bit of additional information to your question and a question from Thomas Oakley.
Thank you, Patrick. And there are a couple of questions on the fee incentives that apply for SMEs, because we are leveraging the same thing for the pilot. I can actually share a link to we have an explanatory note on fees on the EMA website, and there is a section there on SME, but trying to summarize the main ones, for instance, for scientific advice, for non-orphan medicinal products, SMEs still get a reduction of 90%, for instance. And for the application for marketing realization, that would be also the deferral of a fee. And there are others ones. Now, an important one to be aware of is for ATMPs, there is already for scientific advice a reduction, even without participating to the pilot, that apply to everyone. But I will post the link. And as I said, there is a specific section on these incentives for SMEs. And also all of the other incentives, for instance, the specific one on ATMPs. So hopefully that will help. There is also a question on the link with, and I'm trying to, the collaboration on with industry. So that's from Agnete Kierkeby. Regarding, and I think there was one before around, what do we mean by what happens if a product is protected by a patent which has been licensed to an industry partner? Is it eligible or not for this path? And the comment is made that it might be difficult to identify products which have already gone through phase 1 clinical trial, but which do not have yet some sort of industry collaboration. So again, that's a complicated one, but what we are offering here, as Patrick explained, is we have only a limited number of products, and we are limiting it to the academic sectors, because we are also aware that there is a lot of research that starts there, and somehow the translation is is low, and it doesn't then it's not reflected into clinical trials. So at least if we could help those that start within the academic sectors to get into a later stage, and then we understand they may not be able to foster them up to the end, then I guess they would have had that support throughout the time where they do not get an industry partner, because I guess our position would be from the time where there is an industry partner involved, then the support is not as much needed, obviously, because then they can get the support from the industry partner. So I hope this is in a nutshell. And I would say when if you apply for the to be one of the pilot candidate, that's actually covered by the application form. And if you're not clear whether this would be or not eligible for the pilot, then please provide details, and then we can always follow up as well if anything isn't clear. I'm going through the questions there. This one has been tackled. Financial we have. There is a question on what about an ATMP where phase 3 data are already established, but help, for instance, needed for potential CSA development is still relevant to apply for a pilot? I think we need to question whether if it's a very specific and scientific question and support needed, or advice, I guess, needed to in relation to the development of a potent CSA, then it seems to be more a question of for scientific advice. And then the question comes to, do you really need additional support to go through scientific advice? So it really depends on the scope of the nature of the support you would need. If it's purely scientific, then we have normal routes. You might also consider, I guess, whether it would be sufficient in a way to go through prime and scientific advice. Again, we're going to have only the possibility to help up to 5 candidates. So any clarity you can provide in terms of where you foresee potential for the pilot to help, we also help that we ensure that we select those that are in most need of this support. The last question, very relevant question, whether there are any limitation in terms of application from the same applicant. No, we haven't really put that as a limitation. I would say go for potentially the best candidates, because they are most likely to at least get to the first step, but there is no limitation per se. How detailed would you like to see the application, especially when it comes to plan activities like clinical trials? I guess the way we intend, we don't want to be too burdensome for applicants, because you are very busy, and from our standpoint as well, I guess in terms of a selection process, that's why we kept it quite simple in terms of the application form. Ideally provide a summary if it's a clinical trial that's running, for instance, any reference you can give to the study number, or a link, I guess, even on CTs, on a register, might be sufficient. And then if you provide a short summary, so you don't need to be super extensive on the nature of a protocol, because hopefully the clinical trial is running, we would have access to the information. And also you may have seen or not from the application form that we kept it quite flexible. So why we would find it more useful to have a summary for all of the background information we are asking. At the same time, at a minimum, I guess, if you already have documents addressing the background information that would be useful for us to select a candidate, you can also use this, attach it, but then provide clear cross-reference to the section that would need to be reviewed for us to be able to go through the selection process.
Perhaps, Caroline, I can just add one thing to the previous question on if product is already in phase 3 and we need specific advice. Now, just to let you know that all the regulatory procedures at EMA are also, and I put this slide here on, are also open to academia. So scientific advice, PRIME, and other procedures can also be applied by you as academics. So in that case, please get in contact with the academic office. So it's academia@emaeuropa.eu, and we can discuss with you how to help you further. So this is just a more general statement. I have also a question asking on how many candidates will be pre-selected. So this is in our two-stage process. We talked about the number 5 of the final candidates. The pre-selection, we haven't a fixed number. We will look at the maturity and the applications that come in and the maturity of those applications. And then we will invite, be it 5 or be it 10 pre-selected candidates for ITF meetings. So that was a bit the ball game, the number that we had in our mind, but don't pin us down on that number. It might be more, it might be less. It really depends on what is submitted from your side.
Patrick, do you want to take the one on hospital exemption?
Just scrolling down and looking, because while I was talking, I was not reading.
So I can tell it's therapy, which is already fully developed and administered through the hospital exemption route. Is it eligible for the pilot or not?
I can indeed address this, and it is also addressed in our Q&A. So the fact that this product or a product is under hospital exemption will in no way influence the decision on a possibility to be entered into the pilot. So if it's there, you might have some additional relevant clinical data that would support your claim for unmet medical needs. So that could be helpful for you, but it's certainly not that the pilot is an extension or a replacement of the hospital exemption. And perhaps I add here also the aim of the pilot is also not to open the door for hospital exemption, which is very differently and diverse interpreted and implemented in the member states. So it's not because you're in the pilot that would be with the aim of getting this product in hospital exemption. It's rather the opposite. We aim to get this product moving into clinical development via clinical trials, and then hopefully at a later stage to a marketing authorization.
Thank you, Patrick. There is one on what's the difference between the regulatory support provided in this pilot and how it differs from PRIME for products under the price scheme. So I would say it's the regulate, and we have an example with the ongoing candidates. So I would say it's extra. So PRIME provides a number of meetings and steps, and what we have been doing as part of a pilot is to provide this additional in-hand resources, if you like, so help even further the applicant either to identify questions for scientific advice or to help burst further the briefing document, or it might be to arrange an extra teleconference to prepare for a pre-submission meeting or discussion meeting for scientific advice. So I would say it's that extra pair of hands, I guess, that we provide to applicants.
think is enhanced regulatory support on top of what is already offered within the prime scheme. So that's a bit the idea, keeping in mind that for us this is also a pilot to see where you as academic developers need additional support compared to an SME, a small and medium-sized enterprise, or a pharmaceutical company.
Indeed. Another question on the application form, where we have no word limit and whether we can provide as much details as we consider useful, or would it be better to be concise? I'm going to say I think it's really up to, we leave it up to you to determine what level of information would you think it would be useful, knowing that we kept it quite simple. So we don't expect a full-blown briefing document as we would, for instance, for scientific advice. And then, as I said, if you can, for instance, if you already had interactions with scientific advice, or even if a clinical trial is ongoing, then you can also optimize that and use links, for instance. So yes, not a direct answer, but we don't expect like a 80-page briefing document. So I would say it's probably in between.
Yeah, I think keep it as concise as possible for the application form. Just making your points. If you're pre-selected, then you still have the possibility of getting more details to us for us to fully understand your product development and come to the selection of the 5 candidates or the 4 remaining candidates. There's a question on, is the goal of the pilot to move products forward regulatory approval? Would that then still be in the academic setting? I think that was already briefly touched on by Caroline. So indeed, we are not blind to the situation that a product, if it's further developed, if it's further in clinical trials, might become of interest for an industrial partner and would move then out of academia to industry. That is well accepted and is possible. We will not restrict that. On the other hand, talking to academic developers, there are products that are in clinical development for very rare, very orphan diseases, where industry is just not interested because there's no financial gain expected. So that would be a potential good candidate for our pilot, and also a good candidate of a product where at the end an academic partner could become the license, the marketing authorization holder.
We also missed a question earlier, I guess, on whether or not we would get back to all candidates, regardless of whether they are selected or not. We haven't really discussed internally, I should say, but indeed we will get back to you so that you don't wonder whether or not you've been selected. So it makes sense for us to let you know whether certainly the one pre-selected will find out, but I think we will also ensure that whoever has applied is informed that unfortunately they didn't make it to the pre-selection process. I think Petra, you still had your hand raised. I don't know whether it's a legacy hand or whether you wanted to raise a new question. I think it's probably a legacy hand. Okay. I think we seem to have addressed all of them, but please do not hesitate to let us know if we have missed any of them.
If you have any follow-on questions or want additional clarification, please use the email that's also there for the application form, advancedtherapies@ema.europa.eu. just clarify that perhaps in the scope of your question, say that is clarification on academic pilot, because unfortunately I get a lot of junk mail in that mailbox, so I don't want to miss your question.
And just maybe one that was pre-asked as part of the application for this webinar was around support in terms of local education in science and also new regulatory requirements on clinical trials in ATMP. Just to flag, I guess, that indeed as part of this pilot, we will be hopefully able to see whether there are any gaps in the current offerings for trainings. But we also welcome suggestions. That's something that we try to look at proactively. So if you have any suggestion for trainings, please contact the same mailbox that we had on a slide, and maybe we can go back to a slide where we had the email address. And in terms of regulatory requirements on clinical trials, you may be aware that there is an ongoing update of the guidance for investigational medicinal products, ATMPs, and that was also on the work plan last year. Unfortunately, this has not been completed, but that's on the plan, I guess, for this year to look into. Right, and I think I don't see any new hands or message, and I've seen a couple of thank you. So I think we can probably close the session. Thanks everyone for your attendance, and we really look forward to see applications for the pilot. And again, if you have any remaining questions, feel free, or suggestions, please feel free to send them to the Advanced Therapies at EMA Europa EU. Thanks a lot, everyone, and thanks also to all of the contributors from the agency for the webinar and the materials. Thanks.